Suffering is to bondage as knowledge is to power. And this knowledge is so powerful that it's actually been hidden. It has been hidden from the masses. And with all of this influx of information that is coming out, we are at a point, a pinnacle in most of our spiritual journeys where we have the choice to be granted that knowledge, which will allow us the power to free ourselves from the bondage, which will ultimately free us from the suffering that we are all experiencing. See, there's an ancient ancestral term from Ghana that states we must go back to our past and reclaim it so that we may move forward, so we understand why and how we came to be who we are today. And so, although we do not allow our past to define us, it is important for us to look at our past so that we can have the tools that we need to reprogram and decode things going on within us. And so the process that I'm going to be discussing and sharing with you all is exactly that. It is going to give you the tools to reprogram your subconscious mind and decode the very avoidance, attachment, behavior styles that you have within yourself. It is going to give you an explanation as to why you have been operating throughout the world the way you have. And I'm very excited to share this information with you all. It is very esoteric. It is very ancient in its history. It's rich in it. But it is tools that is still able to be applicable today, as so many of us are still stuck in this cycle of suffering. And so this process is called alchemy. Most importantly, or more clearly, spiritual alchemy. And spiritual alchemy has one main objective. We can describe this one main objective as, let me move over here, can't see that one. Inner liberation, i.e. freedom. Freedom. Now, there is a saying by Thoth or Thoth, depending upon how you pronounce it. But he was an Atlantean. He also was very renounced in the land of Kemet. And he produced the Emerald Tablets. There's a saying in the book or the Tablets of Wisdom that state that a man is a star bound to his body. And it is until the end that the man is consumed with strife. And so when we look at that saying, right, and we look at the epitome of suffering to be because we are bound, right? Bound is what is causing the bondage that we are experiencing. Bound to what? Our physical body, right, y'all? So the physical. Bound to the physical or the 3D. Bound to the physical or the 3D. Now, within this physical or third density that we experience, we are looking to take this density and pull it up, right, to the 5th density. So going from 3D to 5D. And the way that you transform energy is by transmutation. And that is what the yin and the yang will be representing in this presentation. So here at the top, we will write our spirit. And here at the bottom, we will write matter. Now, when it comes to transmuting energy, that is getting into more of a spiritual alchemy. That is why we are not necessarily getting into chemical alchemy, but we will be utilizing the fundamentals of chemical alchemy to describe what is occurring in the spiritual sense within your inner world. And so within spiritual alchemy, we are looking to transmute the matter energy, the 3D energy, to that of the spirit energy, right? The 5D. This is no different than what occurred at your conception and birth into this 3D realm. You went from a spirit to a matter. So that's why it's so important to be mindful of perception, because the way that your mind perceives your reality is exactly the way that everything in your external world is going to be orchestrated around. You are at the very center point of everything happening outside of you. And so you could look at, going from matter to spirit again as death. Or you could look at going from spirit to matter as death. Going from 5D to 3D, descending or ascending, right? But we are all cyclical in nature. Everything in nature is constantly moving. We are all filled with energy, constantly in motion. And so shifting your perception and perspective on things as mundane as life or death, which someone could call ironic that I think of it as mundane, but what I mean by mundane is just bound to happen, right? Ever occurring. It is something that occurs that we know is going to occur as soon as we are conscious enough to perceive our everyday reality and things like that. You know that there is going to be a point where you transition, and whether you look at that transition back to the 5D as a death, that is up to your perspective, right? And so when we are looking at our suffering and the bondage that we are experiencing in the physical, the 3D, and we are looking to transform it in the physical, transmute it in the spiritual, we have to get to the root of suffering. What is the root of our suffering? Well, we just discussed that suffering is a result of our lower self, right? We may be familiar with the chakras, but in case you are not, the chakras that are most associated with suffering would be your root chakra, as this is the lowest point of yourself. Right? And it's not that the root isn't necessary. It has its meaning, right? We have to have a baseline in order to ascend from. And so think of your root chakra as your baseline, your starting point. Our root chakra is directly connected to your spiritual body. The root chakra is just as connected to your spiritual body as your spiritual body is connected to your ego or your emotional body. And your emotional body is just as connected to your spiritual body as it is your physical body. We can put body here. And so it's kind of a triad of mirror, right? Mirroring. The spiritual body mirrors the emotional body body mirrors the physical body, and the physical body mirrors the spiritual body. They're all working in synergy to produce what we have here today. What is watching this video and what is producing this video, what is perceiving this information and what is giving this information. Just as the Atlantean Thoth said, man is a star bound to his body, you are a star. And when you shift your perspective and perception through this knowledge, which grants you the power to understand who you truly are, you remember certain things that are lying dormant within you, such as this esoteric information. See, it is not that this information resonates with you because you've never heard it before, you never knew it to be true. It resonates with you because deep down inside, you hold the keys that are going to unlock your freedom. So, when we're looking at freedom, what are we looking to gain freedom from? Like, obviously, we know that we're trying to get free from our bondage, from the physical, but us establishing the connection from the physical to the emotional and the spiritual, this guy right here is a major player. And it is very cliche to, if you are very deep within spiritual communities, talk about like ego death and killing the ego and all that stuff. And it is not that we're just trying to obliterate our ego because we hate it. No, we are trying to purify the ego that is extremely impure. Why? Because we are fed nothing but various forms of programming from the time we are birthed into this realm until the time that we transition, until you tap into that power that lies dormant within you. But for the sake of where most of us are now in the cycle of suffering, you can attribute that directly to your ego. Your ego. And your ego, you are looking to be freed from your ego. The ego that is correlated to things such as core beliefs, core wounds, and other self-destructive personality behaviors that we will take on as a result of the things that are going on in our external world. When you're looking at society today, unfortunately, a lot of us are raised in a school system or by someone else. You are spending 8 hours of your day in a facility that is not enlightening you to your true self. It is actually programming you with their own agendas that they need you to fulfill and carry out for them when you become of age, and outside of the immediate, control of your parents. And even with our parents are distracted even when we come back home from them 8 hours of programming, to our parents being most of the time too tired because they are in this cycle of suffering where they are, chasing fiat currency and unable to fully just be a parent in most cases. And so you are left with the tell-lie vision. And I will write that out real small because we have to break down these words and see them. And so lie to your vision, which is the biggest deception. They had all of these put into houses way back, and they teach society and they program society to trust the government, trust the authorities on your screen. They're not teaching children the difference between cartoons and the things where we were watching on all of these channels of frequencies that we were receiving. We don't know what channels those frequencies were tuned into, because that is a whole nother conversation that we will get into. You stay tuned on this channel. We're going to be uncovering a lot of things, because at the end of the day, this is the goal right here. We are freeing ourselves. We are in the age of knowledge, and it would be a disservice to ourselves not to liberate ourselves. And so we have to step into a space of acknowledging our ego, not necessarily just, casting it away and doing away with it as though it is not needed. No, it was needed because it was formed as a protection due to the core wounds and the core beliefs that we received. And so once you become liberated from your ego, you achieve spiritual oneness or unity with the divine, pure bliss consciousness. That is what is equated to as gold in spiritual alchemy. And I'm going to write gold because I want you all to remember. You cannot see that. I want you all to remember that when we get to the end of the presentation. Gold. So within spiritual alchemy, it can be broken down into 3 universal expressions or symbols representing life, right? And so the first one is materia prima, which translated from Latin means raw matter or first matter. And this raw matter or first matter represents the reduction of an element down to its base level. Its base level would be known as its essence. Therefore, the essence of you is the materia prima, the one that has been untampered with by modern society. And so within this raw matter, it is interpreted as the cosmic womb or the spirit, right? It is an unseen force that represents infinite possibilities and pure potential. And I drew the spiral because the spiral is literally the blueprint when you look at galaxies, when you look at the spiral in your head. So many different things represent spirals, even things in nature, right? So it is very layered, but that essentially is the essence. And once the materia prima is achieved, right? That chi, that life force energy, prima, it represents us coming into a knowing of the traumas that we had held within us. And these traumas will allow us to see what was lying on the surface, right? It is getting to the root of the core issues that you are experiencing within, like we were talking about, your ego self, right? And so some of these traumas might look like on the surface anger and sadness, uncertainty, anxiety, all of those different feelings, emotions of your ego is what I like to call emotions or emotions, right? But beneath the surface, once you reach a state of materia prima, you are able to uncover the root of your traumas, go a little bit deeper beneath the surface instead of leaving it at the surface level of looking at them and compartmentalizing your emotions as single experiences, right? And once you begin to decode this essence that is you, that is when you arrive at the philosopher's stone. And this philosopher's stone is what will grant you the spiritual gold that we were referring to before, which is that spiritual oneness, that unity consciousness that you tap back into once you shed your old self and step into a newer, revitalized version of yourself. That is known as the spiritual gold, the philosopher's stone. And so what essentially this whole spiritual alchemy process is here to do is provide your subconscious mind with a roadmap to liberation, inner freedom. Like we said, pure consciousness, bliss at peace, no unrest, peace, peace. Step 1. Calcination. Now, chemically, it is known as the process of heating a substance over a flame until it is reduced to ashes. Spiritually, it is known for the breaking of the ego. And the breaking of the ego as far as introspection and identification. Introspection into your shadow self, your shadow side, the things that you fear, right? So we have fears. We have limited beliefs. We have these elements of ourselves that we are forced to reflect upon once we confront our shadow self. because that is where these things lie dormant within the ego space. The ego will kind of cover this and make you not focus on this, when these are the elements of ourselves, amongst many more, that will help us come to peace and terms with both the dualities of ourselves. And once these are identified, we could take it further and ask yourself, what no longer serves you? What people, places, things that are intertwining with your energy is not serving you towards your best self? It could be looked at as kind of like the ego death, right? Like this is the flame that ignites the whole process, right? And to me, this was my attempt to draw a flame or a fire. But to me, once you have the ashes and that flame is ignited, it is equated to me somewhat like your pineal gland, right? And how your pineal gland is calcified due to all the fluoride intake and all the poisons we are consuming in various different measures. And once you have your kundalini awakening, right, that fire within that is arose or awakened, I look at it as like, oh, that would be cool if the ego self, the fire started from this whole process, is what begins to decalcify your pineal gland. Because once the ego is kind of pushed aside, it allows you, obviously you're starting on this process, to be open to receiving different wisdom, downloads, and insight that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to receive if the ego self was still in the main seat. In the Emerald Tablets, it is known as its father is the sun, its element is fire, the color is red, associated with the root chakra, the planet is Saturn, and the metal is lead. Very interesting. The next stage is dissolution, right? And within this stage, even though it was unwilling, the ego is in much less control, and it allows the students to fully submerge themselves into the subconscious mind, right? And this is very important because when we are operating out of our conscious mind, the conscious mind has so many artificial structures surrounding it. It is so many artificial structures that make it up. And a lot of these artificial structures can be traced back to patriarchy. Right? Artificial structures. Conscious mind. And so when we are going through the dissolution, we have to allow all of the buried emotions that we've had, that we felt like we've had to suppress due to this or these artificial structures. We have to allow them to surface. And the thing is that we typically will come into a place where we will begin to tap back into the more irrational, feminine, and intuitive aspects, as all three of these aspects are that of the subconscious mind. Ones that haven't been confined to a way of thinking, way of being. So it's best to look at it as it is associated with water, and it is associated with the feminine. Its mother is the moon, is the quote from the Emerald Tablets. To associate with dissolution, look at it as you are opening the floodgates of your subconscious mind and allowing the flow of all of these energies back into yourself. A lot of these energies, right, that were previously held back due to these artificial structures we were just talking about. And so to sum it up, just in case it was a little confusing, And so, although dissolution may look like, oh, we are getting rid of the ego, we are just getting rid of it and replacing it with these new energies, it is about killing the ego so that the ego can be reborn. It is a transitional process within that one step. So its element is water. The color is light blue. I associated with potentially the throat chakra. The planet is Jupiter and the metal is tin. So once we have dissoluted our ego, we have been introduced to a whole new way of seeing the world around us, a whole new way of seeing ourselves. And this gives us the clarity and discernment to kind of shift through ourselves through a process called separation. Now, separation chemically is described as isolation of components by filtration and removing any ungenuine material. And I didn't tell you all the chemical description for dissolution, but it can be described as the ashes being submerged in water after calcination. So after that fire from within has been lit, right? And so it is described in the Emerald Tablets as the wind carries it in its belly. Its element is air. The color is orange, maybe sacral chakra. Excuse me. The planet is Mars and the metal is iron. And so this process is so interesting because it affords you, now that that ego has been fractured and fragmented, we are able to actually see clearly throughout our three bodies, one being the earth body, or the physical. The second being the moon, or the emotional. And the third being the sun, or the spiritual. We are able to see these three bodies as three separate beings of ourselves and kind of shift through and see what is inauthentic, what is disingenuous to us at our true essence. Remember, materia prima, our raw matter, raw form, and what needs to be discarded, what needs to be let go of because it is artificial to us. And so you have to ask yourself during this process, do I know my true authentic self? Not the self that has been told to me or, taught to me to be. Who am I truly? And the way that you do that is through shadow work, confronting those parts of yourself that came up during the dissolution process. And don't shy away from them remember, as irrational as they may be, confront them and face them so that you may reach this stage and truly begin to put yourself and piece yourself back together. This is hard to see, but it does say uncover the layers and remove the veil from the self that was egocentric, right? I like to think of this process as embracing, assessing, and transformation. It is embracing your dark side, right? Assessing what you need to take with you as you continue on this journey, what you need to leave behind, and then allowing you to transform into a better version of yourself with the veil of the material world, the artificial world, all of these constructs that were placed upon us in our most purest form, inching us closer and closer to our desired inner liberation and spiritual oneness. So once we have deciphered what we want to keep with us and what we want to discard, what is left will enter a process of conjunction. Now, conjunction chemically is described as the recombination of sacred elements from separation into a new substance. And in the Emerald Tablets, it is known as the earth is its nurse. The element is earth, the color is green, the planet is Venus, and the metal is copper. And so what this actually embodies is the unison and the joining of forces of both polarities of yourself. See, once you were going through that process of separation and you were discarding some elements of your feminine side, you were discarding some elements of your masculine side, but there were properties from both of these sides that you wanted to keep with you. And so this process is basically displaying one polarity being the left, the masculine, devil, evil, negative. It could be looked at as the rational, right? We can add rational to that list, right? And then we have the right side. The right side being the more feminine side, the angel, good, positive. And I actually think when it comes to Egyptology, it's inverted. And the feminine side is the irrational side and the right side is the more rational side. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to keep it like this, right? And so one side, whether masculine or feminine, this is one extreme, one polarity, and this is the other. And what you want to try to do is be in the middle. Operate from the middle. It's something that's kind of talked about more so in Buddhist traditions, but the path of the middle way in Buddhist traditions will lead you to, and we've all heard that, nirvana, right? And so nirvana is the equivalent in a different transition, in a different ancient text, to the same inner liberation that we are seeking as we're going through this transformative journey. And so, as we discussed, this is the union of the sun and the moon, right? The masculine and the feminine operating in a non-gendered harmony, equilibrium, and balance. So within this two-step process of fermentation, we are seeing that we are combining the physical and the spiritual elements into one to create unity, or the ether, right? It is the birth of our enlightened self and the ultimate maturation of our consciousness. It is said to take us from our reptile brain, the brain, our lower self, our root chakra, and bump us all the way up to this matured state of consciousness, this new way of being. And it is referred to in the Emerald Tablets as separating the earth from the fire. Its substance is sulfur, the color is turquoise, the planet is Venus, the metal is Mercury. The chemical process is growth of bacteria in an organic solution to create a new substance, all usually known as turning grapes into wine. And so you're getting a more refined version of yourself during this two-step process of fermentation. And so once this rebirth ensues, the next step in the process is distillation. And distillation is essentially showing us that we have to, once we break down all these processes and we uncover these truths and separate the ego self from the spiritual self, we must continue to put these things into practice so that we can actually see a real change. Intentionally choosing your inner peace becomes habit. Intentionally choosing this habit will become a way of being. And so what this is meaning is we have access to this true inner bliss. This is what the separation took place for. And regardless of the external factors, we want to experience and observe these motions of the ego, right? We want to observe them, not become them, but simply acknowledge them, observe them, but return back into an eternal state of bliss, right, at all points. And so it's kind of a interaction that's bouncing back and forth. In order for you to have this true inner bliss or this true inner peace within yourself, you have to build up your aura. Your energetic field is what is protecting you, not only from the things happening, the external factors we discussed, but from your own self. Just because you have broken down the ego and went through these stages does not mean that you are no longer human. You are still human, and your mind is still susceptible to various forms of frequency manipulation or attempts of it. And so you building this force field around your inner peace, protecting your peace, protecting your energy, that is where the phrase is coined. But we want to be able to intentionally practice it and choose it with intention each time something that triggers us, triggers our ego self, our lower self, our reptile mind to react, to expose itself. We are reminded that there is another way. And so that is why in the book of the Emerald Tablets, in the Book of Wisdom, it also states that it rises from the earth to heaven and descends again to earth, thereby combining itself, and I spelled that wrong, the powers of both above and below. So really implementing the dualities. Remember, the feminine and the masculine. You don't want to be on either polarity of it. You want it to be in unison, right? And so the substance would be mercury. The color is deep blue. The planet is Mercury, and the metal is silver. The chemical process is heating or boiling and condensation of the fermented solution to increase the purity. And we mentioned wine before. It would be the equivalent of taking wine up to brandy, or like some type of spirit or liquor that is even more refined and even more pure than wine itself. And that is essentially what takes place. We are extracting the elements of you at its most pure essence and extracting that after heating it to give us that gold that we are looking for. This is another demonstration. You want to kind of be in observer mode of your thoughts, of your emotions. This is what's going to guide your actions, and you want all of your actions to be intentional. So once you have established a routine of returning to inner bliss, no matter the external or internal noise, and that becomes a lifestyle, that becomes a way of being, existing, and navigating this realm, you have entered coagulation, which is the final step within this 7-step transformative process, in which you have freed your mind. You have freed your soul from your mind, I should say. It is the freedom of the soul from the mind. And the soul is able to reunite with that materia prima we discussed, that raw matter, that life force, chi, spirit, the cosmic womb. And so you know for a fact that you are no longer tied or bound to the suffering that comes from material possessions, attachment styles, all these various self-destructive behavior means by which we have learned how to navigate life through, because we've been in survival mode this whole time. It is described in the Emerald Tablets that you will obtain the glory of the whole universe. All obscurity will be clear to you. The substance is salt, the color is violet, the planet is the sun, the metal is gold. That gold that we talked about is directly tied to the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone, remember, it comes after that journey of decoding the materia prima. So you have decoded it and you have attained this Philosopher's Stone now. You have received the elixir of life. And the cosmic key, I drew the Ankh here because in this whole presentation, this whole transformative step, the Ankh can be represented as the pineal gland, as the phallus symbol, and the womb space as the pituitary gland. And it is the union of these two, again, the divine masculine, divine feminine, to come together, and an interaction of light takes place right in the very center. And this actually is taking place in your mind when you think about the Kundalini serpent that is traveling through your spine, and the seat of the soul, right? The throne of God is actually located in your temple. And that's why I drew a temple, this very scary looking man, woman thing. Ra is sitting on one side, Isis on the other, but El, which is you, the temple of God, you in the middle, right here, is what is represented, and that's how you get the whole concept of Israel, right? And that is on either side of your temple. So you have Ra and Isis on either side of your temple. So when it discusses Solomon's temple, it is actually housed within you. You hold the keys, like I told you in the beginning, to all of this information. But it is up to you to unlock this information so that you may access your Merkabah, your light ship, the light vessel that is you. Unlock it so that you may free your soul from the confines of your mind. I hope you learned something, and I hope something did resonate with you. And until next time.